Greetings comrades, my name is Gigantles, and this is my video about the process of canonization, featuring Blessed Carlo Acutis. This is the second video that I've made on this topic, being a remake of an older video I made almost 5 years ago. And that was a very long time ago. That video was prompted by the beatification of Blessed Carlo Acutis, and this one by his canonization. Since then, I went through a phase of not narrating my videos due to issues with my microphones. That issue has since been resolved. This video will be the first of several remakes of older videos where I update and narrate them. Although I will continue with my Ecumenical Council series up to Vatican II, I will be remaking them with narration upon finishing. After all, the first of them was almost 5 years ago, and I've improved in quality since then. Normally, I'll be generous with the amount of time this text is shown on screen, but with my narration, I'm going to be moving through it a lot faster. Nonetheless, feel free to pause if you need to. Anyway, so to focus on the process of canonization. There are over 10,000 saints in the Catholic Church. Saints with an uppercase S for the canonization as being officially recognized and confirmed. They are dwarfed in number by the thousands upon thousands of unofficial saints with a lowercase s. These saints are known only unto God by name, with their eternal fates unknown to us on earth. There is a need to canonize saints in the Church as they are upheld as examples to follow for the faithful still on earth. By following their examples, not just in action but also in the virtues they embodied, we may become more like them and thus worthy of heaven. Because of the nature of canonization, it is ultimately an infallible piece of theology. Not as dogma, yet, but as a certain truth or secondary object of infallibility. The Church cannot approve of any practice that would endanger souls through perverted teachings and theology. As such, wrongful canonizations would mean that we would risk venerating someone in hell. So the conclusion is that canonizations are infallible. Not forgetting that the amount of work that goes into the process of canonization really leaves no room for doubt. You'll see how much work goes into the process of canonization shortly. Every entity in heaven is a saint by definition. This includes the angels, such as the three named archangels, Saints Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. They are saints in a different way to us, however, since they were among the angels who never fell with Satan, whilst we humans fell and had to be redeemed. The unofficial saints, though unnamed, give us hope that our friends and family who have left this world may still enjoy the beatification in heaven. But we cannot venerate them, only offer them our prayers as they are purified through purgatory. Saints usually go through purgatory too, though often for shorter times as they have generally reformed their hearts and minds to align more with God in life. It is for that reason that they are canonized as role models for us to follow. Even St. Thomas Aquinas, 1225-74, needed to genuflect in purgatory before going to heaven. What we don't achieve in aligning ourselves with God on earth will be achieved through a far more painful method in purgatory. That makes for the veneration of saints as absolutely critical for us. There is a very wide range of saints who come from many different backgrounds and walks of life. Priests and laymen, cradle Catholics and converts, those of renowned character and those who struggled with sin up to their final breath. Saint Dismas, 18 BC to 33 AD, repented on the cross, finding himself forgiven and taken to heaven by Christ. Saint Olga, 890 to 925, did horrendous and bloodthirsty things to the people that killed her husband, but she later converted and repented of her actions. Even Saint Hippolytus of Rome, 170 to 235, who is the only saint that was an anti-pope. He reconciled with Pope St. Pontian, 230 to 235, as they were both forced to work as prisoners in the Sardinian mines. The personal acceptance of canonized saints and their veneration isn't essential for salvation, but accepting the theology behind it, even in the absence of personal devotion, is required. If you want to know how controversial the case of unofficial saints are, let's have a look at one. Blessed Edvige Carboni, 1880 to 1952, the Italian mystic, once had a vision of Benito Mussolini, 1883 to 1945, in purgatory, asking for her intercession through prayer. Yes, the Italian dictator. God later told her that Mussolini had entered heaven thanks to her prayers. Apparently, Mussolini had a significant change of heart from his usual animosity for Catholicism, repenting of his actions shortly before he was killed. I fully believe that God will forgive people who repent, no matter their actions, and they may one day be in heaven, after a very long time in purgatory. If Mussolini was saved, then good for him. And before you ask, Hitler doesn't have any mystic backing up any claim of repentance, instead saying that demons are having a field day with him. But again, accepting this unofficial canonization isn't essential to the faith, so you don't have to. When Blessed Edvige Carboni is canonized, that won't mean Mussolini's calls for canonization will then start. Even if he and other controversial figures are in heaven, their actions on earth will prevent them from being officially canonized due to the risk of scandal in apparently promoting their actions. There are two types of saints. The first are martyrs, those who have sacrificed their lives for the faith, often enduring hardship and persecution as a result. Within the martyrs, there are an additional three categories. The first is white martyrdom, meaning that they were persecuted for the faith but never shed blood. This includes Saint Francis of Assisi, 1181 to 1226, and Saint Catherine Tekakwitha, 1656 to 80. Then there's green or blue martyrdom, meaning that they've lived lives of extreme penance and discipline, and this is usually reserved for those who were monastics and hermits, including Saint Cuthbert, 634 to 87, and Saint Ephrem of Syria, 306 to 73. Finally is red martyrdom, meaning that they've spilled their blood and or were killed for their faith. This includes Saint Stephen from 5 to 36 and Saint Lucy of Syracuse 283 to 304. Because of the resoluteness of their faith carrying them to death, they were usually believed to go straight to heaven. This was not a universal belief, even in the early church. Saint Optatus, who died in 387, recorded a woman punished for venerating unapproved martyrs in the 4th century. So even by then, there was a standard of investigation that needed to be performed. I will go into those early methods of investigation shortly. The second type of saint are the confessors. Confessors didn't suffer persecution to the same extent as the martyrs, demonstrating the resoluteness of their faith and virtuous characters through word and action in life, including Saint Thomas Aquinas and Saint Gemma Galgani in 1878 to 1903. One thing you will notice is that a lot of martyrs in the church are usually grouped together based upon mass martyrdoms of believers, whilst confessors are almost always individually canonized. Regardless of whether the candidate for canonization is a confessor or martyr, from the early church or in the current age of information, the canonization centers around two fundamental aspects. 1. The faith of the candidate, and 2. The motivation of the candidate. For the martyrs, the witnesses to their persecution and martyrdom were interviewed, and court documents obtained. For the confessors, their works were analysed, and those who had known them were interviewed. St. Augustine of Hippo, 354 to 430, in the late 4th century, detailed the process of canonization, beginning with a bishop opening an investigation into the candidate, performing a thorough investigation, and sending the information to the local archbishop or metropolitan. The archbishop or metropolitan would then consult with his suffragan bishops, who were bishops that assisted a main bishop in a large or population-dense ecclesiastical province. If they made a favourable decision, an altar would be built over the tomb of the saint. This is why many old churches are built over the graves of saints and necropolises. If that was not possible, they would move the candidate's relics into a church. Relics are an essential part of the church. The relics of saints are literally physical pieces of those whose souls are in heaven with God. God has been known to perform countless miracles through the relics of saints. During the final resurrection, God will use those relics to physically resurrect the saints, so we look after them, giving them the respect or veneration that they deserve until then. Because of the association with necropolises of the persecution from the earliest days of the church, we maintain that tradition of being surrounded or in proximity to the relics of our saints by having their relics in our churches and chapels. When it came to the process of canonization, miracles being performed through the relics of candidates would contribute towards their cause. This was done under limited circumstances and after an initial investigation to make sure the candidate was worth investigating and venerating. Miracles can only be done through the intercession of saints if they are in heaven before God, allowing them to directly intervene with Him on our behalf. That's why miracles are so important in the process of canonization. But as you've already read, this process was carried out under the jurisdiction of local bishops and their direct superior. This led to the regional veneration of saints and martyrs, but there was no universal veneration for them. This began to change during the pontificate of Pope Leo II, who was Pope between 795 to 816. He changed the process of canonization during the canonization of Saint Stuytbert or Switbert, who lived between 637 to 713 and was a missionary bishop. This change centralized the process and for the better. There wasn't a universal calendar of feast days yet, but universal veneration started in 993 during the canonization of Saint Ulrich of Augsburg, 890 to 973, by Pope John XV, who was Pope between 985 to 996. The reason why this centralization was necessary is due to the primacy of Rome, or the Pope. Contrary to what the East Orthodox say, there is plenty of evidence showing that the Pope in Rome was the highest authority in the Church and had the final say. This prevented the unapproved canonization of saints, since the Pope was also trusted to not make an error on this matter either, papal infallibility. Saints weren't venerated until the Pope approved of their canonization. This isn't an exaggeration. No bishop could force or encourage saints he canonized to be venerated outside of his diocese, but the Pope could do that as he was the highest authority in the Church. For further backing to the process of canonization, the popes pushed for investigations and final declarations about canonizations to be performed at church councils. Not necessarily ecumenical councils, but councils in general. This wasn't an appeal to conciliarism, but to ensure that there was unified recognition of the saint's canonization by the Church in general. The Pope would have a lot more success in sharing the results of the investigation with the bishops present and finally canonizing the saint than if he did it anyway and the bishops across the world had their doubts after hearing conflicting narratives. That's usually the whole point of having a council, and many ecumenical councils were convened to merely proclaim what had already been solved by the Pope. The last Western saint to be canonized by anyone other than the Pope was Saint Walter of Pontoise, also known as Goltier monk, 1030–99, an ex-professor of philosophy and rhetoric, by the Archbishop of Rouen in 1153, who was Saint Hugh of Amiens, and was the Archbishop between 1130–64. Pope Alexander III, 1159–81, made another change so that the Pope would need to make the official confirmation of a saint's canonization in 1173. The reason why was because several bishops had tried to push for man's canonization despite him having fallen drunk and dying as a result. So much for his virtuous character. Pope Alexander III was not happy with them. Pope Innocent III, 1198–1216, confirmed this exclusive right of the Pope in 1200 during his canonization of Saint Kunigunde of Luxembourg, if that's how you pronounce it. Pope Urban VIII, 1623–44, again confirmed this in the 1634 apostolic letter Caelistis Hierusalem, and in the Decreta Servanca in Beatificatione et Canonizatione Sanctorum of 1642. Then Pope Benedict XIV, 1740–58, came along. His works from 1734–8, prior to his papacy, helped redefine the process of canonization to something that we are more familiar with today. This very long, very complicated process would remain in place until 1983, when they were reformed by Pope St. John Paul II. And yes, it was necessary to carry out those reforms. Here, let me give you a summary of the pre-1983 process of canonization just to prove why it was time to significantly shorten it. 1. Candidate for canonization is brought to attention. 2. Selection of vice postulator to promote the juridical inquiries outside of Rome, which are instituted by the local episcopal authorities. 3. Preparation of inquiries, which are A. An investigation of reputation for sanctity and miracles, B. Prohibition of unapproved veneration, and C. Investigation of the candidate's writings. 4. Results of investigation are sent to Rome. 5. A cardinal is chosen to be the realtor of the cause. The title Servant of God is given to the candidate. 6. Writings of the saint are revised by theologians and overseen by the realtor. The advocate and procurator, chosen by the postulator general, prepare all the documents. 7. Documents are distributed to the cardinals of the Sacred Congregation of Rites 40 days before discussion is held. 8. If nothing un-Catholic is found, a decree is published that authorizes further action of the cause. 9. A debate between the cardinals in the Sacred Congregation of Rites is held regarding the appointment for the introduction of the cause. 10. If favorable, the cardinals will present the cause to the Pope, who will sign it and declare the candidate as venerable. 11. Investigation into claimed miracles and sanctity for the venerable candidate begins. 12. Investigation into whether a cult of veneration for the venerable candidate should be approved. 13. A decree for the venerable candidate's sanctity is investigated, and may be declared valid and published. 14. An 18-month window for investigating claims of miracles and sanctity is opened, and must be sent to Rome for authentication. 15. The advocate for the cause prepares all the documents that validates all the previous processes. 16. Confirmation that the validation documents for the previous processes are all valid by Rome. 17. Investigation to see if the venerable individual displays the theological and cardinal virtues to a heroic degree. This is of primary importance for confessors. There are multiple discussions between the Sacred Congregation of Rites and the Pope. 18. If favorable, the document is given to the Pope to sign after he prays on it. 19. Miracles need to be investigated and authenticated. 2 are needed if virtues of a heroic degree are provable. 3 are needed if virtues are of an ordinary degree. And 4 are needed if relying on hearsay. 20. Meetings to confirm the authentication of miracles and their approval. 21. Final meeting of the Sacred Congregation of Rites is held to debate if the venerable candidate should be beatified. 22. If favorable, the candidate is declared blessed with a cult of veneration for them approved. 23. Further meetings of the Sacred Congregation of Rites to confirm at least 2 miracles, or however many are needed, depending on their reported virtues. 24. The Pope canonizes the blessed candidate as a saint. And that is the entire process for confessors. If you are wondering where the infamous devil's advocate was in all of this, he's involved in most of the process. After all, his duty was to ensure that the arguments for the cause for the candidate's canonization were robust enough to withstand criticism. But I'm not done yet. Now for the process for martyrs. 1. Points 1 to 5 of the process for confessors are followed. 2. Immediate investigation into the martyrdom, its motives, and any miracles associated with it. 3. Miracles and motives are discussed. 4. The emphasis on miracles wasn't as strong and could be up to an ordinary degree, if that was all that was found. 5. These discussions occurred through individual dispensations from the Pope, producing a document on the proof of martyrdom, cause of martyrdom, and any associated miracles. 6. Final discussion on the advance to beatification, which is then presented to the Pope. 7. The martyr is beatified. 8. Final canonization proceeds for the same way as for confessors, but only needing a single miracle. Would it surprise you if I said that this process of canonization would take centuries to be completed? Keep in mind that this was during a time where illiteracy was commonplace and actions weren't as public, so investigations needed to be thorough to ensure that they are authenticated. But by the time of Pope St. John Paul II, 1978 to 2005, the issues of obscurity and authentication were no longer as much of an issue. Just think about it nowadays. With the internet, do you know how much easier it will be to perform the investigation for candidates' characters? If anything, there'll be too much material to look through, and the role of the devil's advocate was inherently flawed. If there was concerning material or actions in a candidate's life, they would surface during the course of the investigation. Standards can be raised to naturally increase the accuracy of the process, not by using someone who would always be opposed to whatever came forward. If necessary, third parties could be consulted, such as when Saint Mother Teresa, 1910 to 97, was in the process of canonization. Her critics were invited to speak before the team investigating a character. The current process of canonization was created by Pope St. John Paul II in 1982 and finalized in 1983. In contrast to the multiple phases of the earlier process, there are really only 5 phases in this one. 1. The local bishop opens the calls for the canonization of the candidate, usually at least 5 years after the candidate's death, though this can be bypassed by the Pope, such as with Saint Mother Teresa and Venerable Sister Lucia, 1907 to 2005. 2. There is a detailed investigation and compilation of the candidate's works and writings, including videos and audio recordings for more modern ones. 3. The results of this investigation are presented to the congregation of the cause of the saints. 4. If approved, the candidate's cause is assigned a postulator and they are declared a servant of God, also known as Servus Deus, and they are referred to as servant of God, insert their name. Religious orders that frequently have saints canonized from their number will have an assigned postulator that works exclusively with them. By extension of this approval, they receive permission to exhume the body of the candidate to prevent unapproved veneration and preserve their relics. You're probably wondering about incorruptibility, no? Whilst the incorruptibility of saints' relics used to be an indicator that the process of canonization could advance, that has since been dropped. Incorruptibility is when the body of a saint hasn't decayed like it normally would have. Not that it remains completely undecayed, but that it has been preserved to an unnatural extent. Compare a half-rotten body to a mummified one, both being in an environment that would normally lead to a body rotting. There are different standards now to confirm the incorruptibility of the saint's body, but they are not treated as support to their cause for canonization. It didn't help that the saint's relics would sometimes start to decay after they were moved to another location. Most people don't even know what an incorrupt saint looks like, or how to distinguish one from their wax or silicone mask or covering, as we see with Saint Padre Pio, 1887 to 1968, and Saint Bernadette, 1844 to 1879. 5. If there is sufficient evidence compiled to convince the congregation for the cause of the saints that the candidate performed the theological and cardinal virtues to a heroic degree, they will present their results to the Pope, who will declare them venerable or venerabilis, referring to them as venerable, insert their name. At this point, prayers and prayer cards are published to encourage the faithful to call upon the candidate's aid, so when they are in heaven and can finally intercede for us, we will know about it through their attributed miracles. 6. For this step, there is a divergence over whether the candidate is a confessor or martyr. If a martyr, the Pope will need to make a declaration of martyrdom that the venerable candidate gave their life willingly as a witness of faith, stereotypical martyrdom, or for a heroic act of charity for others, such as Saint Maximilian Kolb, 1894 to 1941, who gave his life to save a Jewish man. For confessors, a miracle attributed to them is required to finally be beatified. Beatification declares the candidate blessed, or beatus or beata in Latin, and they are referred to as blessed, insert their name. These miracles are usually medical ones, where cures are spontaneous, have no scientific explanation, and can be directly linked to the faithful's prayers or intercession to the venerable candidate. They are of course verified by the church and medical professionals. A feast day is granted to the home diocese or religious order. For those who are curious, the Blessed Virgin Mary is indeed a saint, even if she is usually referred to by her title of Blessed. This is simply following what St. Gabriel said in Luke 1:28 to the Blessed Virgin Mary being full of grace, or ke charitomene, a Greek word describing her as immaculate, and then when St. Elizabeth claimed that everyone would literally call her blessed in Luke 1:42-3. It may surprise you to know this, but the first universal calendar of the saints' feast days was made by Pope St. Pius V, 1566-72, in 1568, to prevent Protestants from trying to add their own fake saints and remove real ones from being venerated in the church. 7. The next step in the process of canonization is the canonization of the individual themselves, which usually requires a second verified miracle that can be attributed to a confessor, or just one miracle for a martyr. This, however, can be waived if the candidate led a life of great merit through certain actions. For instance, Pope St. John XXIII, 1958-63, was granted this exception for convening Vatican II, as well as managing to convene it even earlier after he was told he wouldn't be able to convene it so soon. This is a very rare exception, requiring agreement from the Pope, the College of Cardinals, and the Congregation for the Cause of the Saints. Upon canonization, the individual will be recognized as a saint, sanctus, and referred to as saint, insert their name. Their feast day will be extended across the church, and there will be parishes built in their name. For those who are wondering where the candidate's soul is during this process, as a servant of God, their soul is in purgatory at the very least. As a venerable, their soul is in purgatory at the very least as well. As a blessed, their soul is in heaven, but we don't know with 100% certainty. As a saint, however, we know that their soul is in heaven with 100% certainty. There are also equivalent canonizations, which are those who are canonized before the formal process of canonization was finalized and applied. Approval of these ancient canonizations rests on 3 conditions as defined by Pope Benedict XIV. 1. There must be an ancient cult of veneration. 2. There must be a well-attested life of virtue or martyrdom by credible historians. And 3. They must have a consistent history of miracles. An example of this included the canonization of Pope St. Gregory VII, 1073-85 in 1729, prior to Pope Benedict XIV's pontificate. So you can really see how influential he was on papal documents back then. And in case you try to read about Pope Benedict XIV on Wikipedia, ignore the part where it claimed he beatified Charlemagne. That was a private document before he became Pope on why he thought Charlemagne could be beatified. The reason why Charlemagne 748-814 isn't canonized is partly because the Protestants have tried to portray him as being against the veneration of icons and relics, and partly because Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor, 1122-90, tried to have Charlemagne canonized by the anti-pope Paschal III, 1164-8, in 1165. The latter left a bad taste in the mouth regarding the canonization of the Father of Europe, and the former has left a twisted legacy of him. I would love to open up his course for canonization, but that's for Rome to approve of. Anyway, going back to equivalent canonizations. If you've looked at church history, you'll notice that there are 4 church fathers who aren't canonized. Sometimes they aren't even called church fathers. And they are Clement of Alexandria, 150-215, Tertullian, 155-220, Origen, 185-253, and Eusebius of Caesarea, 260-339. Why aren't these great men canonized? Well, Origen and Tertullian became heretics. As for Eusebius and Clement, we have no reason to. Some older saint feast day calendars may have had those 2 on them, but they've since been removed, and that is because there is not enough evidence to suggest that they had a historical cult of veneration, as well as an absence of miracles. Some of their writings also seem suspicious. Their canonizations weren't revoked but annulled, never being valid in the first place. If a schismatic church with apostolic succession and appropriate standards of canonization returns to communion with us, churches like the East Orthodox, but probably not the Anglicans, their canonizations will be accepted as both valid and licit. Regarding the East Orthodox, there are controversial characters like Mark of Ephesus, 1392-1444, who was central to the anti-union movement that rejected the Council of Florence whilst calling Catholics heretics. The personal veneration of saints isn't required for salvation, so he likely won't be venerated by Catholics. The process of canonization can be suspended, stalled, or even cancelled depending on the results of the candidate. This didn't just happen with that drunk guy from earlier. In 2024, the process of canonization for the mystic known as Luisa Picaretta, 1865 to 1947, was cancelled. She claimed to have survived on the Eucharist alone for 60 years and had multiple visions. Her works tell a different and concerning story. In 1938, her confessor, not to be confused with the confessors in canonization, this particular confessor is for mystics and visionaries to speak with and be guided by, told her to seize her writing because of its sometimes heretical contents. Her words were placed on the Index of Forbidden Books that same year. Her course for canonization was opened a while later, and she was made a servant of God in 1994. Her course stalled after that for 30 years. Her writings supported errors such as premillennialism, the writings themselves being required for salvation, and the losing of human will when following the divine will. The list goes on with her nearly 10,000 pages of visions. So for those who claim that Pope St. John Paul II's reforms made the process of canonization unreliable, this proves them wrong. Louisa's case was determined to be fake and the process ceased. In the meantime, a mass was offered for the hopeful canonization of the legendary John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, 1892 to 1973, in 2017, that a cause may be opened soon. A conference for his canonization was held in 2018, and the local Archbishop of Birmingham is in clear support for this. The last thing I know is that the Archbishop delegated this matter to the priest in 2024, so it may be that that priest is compiling information for the Archbishop to eventually hand to Rome. Another reason why it was necessary to change the process of canonization is just the sheer backlog of candidates that needed to be approved. There are over 10,000 saints in the Church. You're probably wondering how many servants of God, venerables, and blesseds there are too. Not as many, of course, but there's enough that the acceleration of the process of canonization was needed. The number of servants of God is somewhere in the thousands, and Wikipedia helpfully only shares a couple of hundred. The oldest servant of God on this list is Servant of God Henry II the Pious, a Polish king who lived between 1196 to 1241, who was declared a servant of God by Pope Francis, who was Pope between 2013 to 2025, in 2015. The servant of God who has spent the longest time on this list is Servant of God Alfonso Sanchez, 1289 to 1329, who has been on it since 1723. There are around 111 venerables. The oldest venerable is Venerable Alessandro Luzageo, 1551 to 1602, who was declared venerable in 1899. The venerable who has been on this list the longest is Innocenzo Leonelli, 1592 to 1625, declared venerable sometime before 1679. Pope Venerable Pius XII, who was Pope between 1939 to 58, is on this list. Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen, who lived between 1895 to 1979, is on here too, but his process of canonization has been stalled for a while. Long story short, in 2019 the Vatican had concerns about how a priest who had abused the children had apparently been under the authority of Venerable Archbishop Sheen. The diocese claimed that that priest was chosen by a successor and not by the Archbishop himself. There is hope that the current Pope Leo XIV will continue his calls for canonization this year. There are probably thousands of blesseds, because martyrs make their way up to this classification sooner than confessors. In this list you will find examples of mass martyrdom, such as the 108 Polish martyrs of World War II and the 49, also Polish, martyrs from Sandomierz during the Mongol invasions. The oldest blessed on this list is Blessed Eutychius of Como, who died in 539 and was beatified sometime before the process of canonization was developed, which is sometimes referred to as pre-congregation. The next oldest blessed on this list is Blessed Nocte the Stammerer, 840 to 912, who was beatified in 1512. Before you ask, yes, he stammered as a result of tooth loss as a youth. The blessed who has been on this list the longest is Blessed Vitus of Hungary, dying in 1297 and being beatified in 1319. Two others older than him are pre-congregation and thus are unknown in their dates. There are 10 popes on this list, including Blessed Pope John Paul I, who was pope for only 33 or so days in 1978, and Blessed Pope Pius IX, who was pope between 1846 to 70. Blessed Carlo Acutis is on this list for the moment, but his canonization is imminent and I will talk about him later. As for the saints, the oldest saint in heaven is Saint Abel, who waited probably close to 5,200 years for Christ to open the gates of heaven. If Saint Eve died at the same time as Saint Adam, then they waited for close to 4,300 years. As a result of Pope St. John Paul II's reforms, he would canonize 483 saints in his 27 years as Pope. This was more saints than the last 107 popes combined over a period of 892 years. Keep in mind that we've had 267 popes so far, so Pope St. John Paul II did as many as almost half the popes put together. How about I help you guys visualize that? Pope St. John Paul II, who canonized 483 saints, canonized more saints than Blessed Pope John Paul I, who canonized 0, Pope St. Paul VI, who canonized 84, Pope St. John the 23rd, who canonized 10, Venerable Pope Pius XII, who canonized 34, Pope Pius XI, who canonized 29, Pope Benedict XV, who canonized 4, Pope St. Pius X, who canonized 11, Pope Leo XIII, who canonized 19, Blessed Pope Pius IX, who canonized 54, Pope Gregory XVI, who canonized 6, Pope Pius VIII, who canonized 0, Pope Leo XII, who canonized 2, Servant of God Pope Pius VII, who canonized 5, Pope Pius VI, who canonized 0, Pope Clement XIV, who canonized 0, Pope Clement XIII, who canonized 6, Pope Benedict XIV, who canonized 10, Pope Clement XII, who canonized 5, Servant of God Pope Benedict XIII, who canonized 7, Pope Innocent XIII, who canonized 0, Pope Clement XI, who canonized 8, Pope Innocent XII, who canonized 2, Pope Alexander VIII, who canonized 5, Blessed Pope Innocent XI, who canonized 3, Pope Clement X, who canonized 8, Pope Clement IX, who canonized 3, Pope Alexander VII, who canonized 4, Pope Innocent X, who canonized 0, Pope Urban VIII, who canonized 7, Pope Gregory XV, who canonized 6, Pope Paul V, who canonized 5, Pope Leo XI, who canonized none, Pope Clement VIII, who canonized 8, Pope Innocent IX, who canonized 0, Pope Gregory XIV, who canonized 0, Pope Urban VII, who canonized 0, Pope Sixtus V, who canonized 1, Pope Gregory XIII, who canonized 1, Pope St. Pius V, who canonized 1, Pope Paul IV, who canonized 0, Pope Marcellus, who canonized 0, Pope Julius III, who canonized 0, Pope Paul III, who canonized 2, Pope Clement VII, who canonized 1, Pope Adrian VI, who canonized 1, Pope Leo X, who canonized 11, Pope Julius II, who canonized 6, Pope Julius III, who canonized none, Pope Alexander VI, who canonized 1, Pope Innocent VIII, who canonized 2, Pope Sixtus IV, who canonized 6, Pope Paul II, who canonized none, Pope Pius II, who canonized 1, Pope Calixtus III, who canonized 5, Pope Nicholas V, who canonized 2, Pope Eugene IV, who canonized 3, Pope Martin V, who canonized 1, Pope Gregory XII, who canonized 0, Pope Innocent VII, who canonized 0, Pope Boniface IX, who canonized 2, Pope Urban VI, who canonized 1, Pope Gregory XI, who canonized none, Blessed Pope Urban V, who canonized 2, Pope Innocent VI, who canonized 0, Pope Clement VI, who canonized 1, Pope Benedict XII, who canonized 0, Pope John the 22nd, who canonized 2, Pope Clement V, who canonized 1, Blessed Pope Benedict XI, who canonized 0, Pope Boniface VIII, who canonized 3, Pope St. Celestine V, who canonized none, Pope Nicholas IV, who canonized none, Pope Honorius IV, who canonized none, Pope Martin IV, who canonized 1, Pope Nicholas III, who canonized 0, Pope John the 21st, who canonized 0, Pope Adrian V, who canonized 0, Blessed Pope Innocent V, who canonized 0, Blessed Pope Gregory X, who canonized 1, Pope Clement IV, who canonized 1, Pope Urban IV, who canonized 2, Pope Alexander IV, who canonized 3, Pope Innocent IV, who canonized 6, Pope Celestine IV, who canonized 0, Pope Gregory IX, who canonized 5, Pope Honorius III, who canonized 9, Pope Innocent III, who canonized 9, Pope Celestine III, who canonized 9, Pope Clement III, who canonized 4, Pope Gregory VIII, who canonized 0, Pope Urban III, who canonized 0, Pope Lucius III, who canonized 4, Pope Alexander III, who canonized 7, Pope Adrian IV, who canonized 3, Pope Anastasius IV, who canonized 0, Blessed Pope Eugene III, who canonized 2, Pope Lucius II, who canonized 0, Pope Celestine II, who canonized 0, Pope Innocent II, who canonized 3, Pope Honorius II, who canonized 0, Pope Calixtus II, who canonized 5, Pope Gelasius II, who canonized 0, Pope Paschal II, who canonized 4, Blessed Pope Urban II, who canonized 6, and Blessed Pope Victor III, who canonized 0. Working backwards, that's all the popes prior to Pope St. John Paul II up to Blessed Pope Victor III, who was pope between 1086 to 7. Pope St. Gregory VII canonized 6 saints as a pope, which then surpassed Pope St. John Paul II's total when combined with the popes between them. Pope Benedict XVI canonized 84 saints as pope in his 8 years. Pope Francis canonized 942, though 812 of them are the martyrs of Otranto. who were martyred when the Ottomans took the city. Pope Leo XIV is set to canonize 9 saints by mid-October. As for the beatifications, Pope Leo XIV is in the process of beatifying 17 candidates. Pope Francis beatified 1,541 candidates. Pope Benedict XVI beatified 870, Pope St. John Paul II beatified 1,344, Pope St. Paul VI, who was Pope between 1963 to 78, beatified 62 candidates. And before you ask, I know I haven't covered Blessed Pope John Paul I, but that's because he was barely in office and had no time to assist in any part of any candidate's process of canonization. Pope St. John XXIII beatified 5 candidates. Venerable Pope Pius XII beatified 44 candidates. Pope Pius XI, 1922 to 39, beatified 511 candidates. Pope Benedict XV, 1914 to 1922, beatified 46. Pope St. Pius X, 1903 to 14, beatified 131 candidates. Pope Leo XIII, 1878 to 1903, beatified potentially up to 300,000 candidates, mostly from Vietnam, but definitely at least 40 named confessors. And technically, Pope St. John Paul II canonized all those Vietnamese martyrs in 1988, but I didn't include that in the number because we don't know the names of most of them. Blessed Pope Pius IX beatified only 1 candidate. Again, we can see a significant acceleration in beatifications after the reforming of the process of canonization. It's a lot harder to locate the number of blesseds of earlier popes, hence why I stopped at Blessed Pope Pius IX. For the venerables now. Pope Leo XIV needs to declare 7 candidates venerable. Pope Francis declared 556 candidates venerable. Pope Benedict XVI declared 181 candidates venerable. Pope St. John Paul II declared 523 candidates venerable. Pope St. Paul VI declared 85 candidates venerable. Pope St. John XXIII declared 11 candidates venerable. Venerable Pope Pius XII declared 1 candidate venerable. Pope Pius XI declared 27 candidates venerable. Pope Benedict XV declared no one venerable. Pope St. Pius X declared no one venerable. Pope Leo XIII declared 27 candidates venerable. Blessed Pope Pius IX declared no one venerable. Pope Leo XIV approved of 4 servants of God already, alongside 174 martyrs. Pope Francis approved of around 444 servants of God and around 393 martyrs. For the rest of the popes, I'd have to look up each individual candidate instead of having a nice list to look at, as I've been doing so far. Something interesting that I found was that on the list of Pope Francis, one of the people he declared a servant of God was a guy called Magnus Aurelius Cassiodorus Senator, 485 to 585. No, he wasn't a senator, that was just his name. He was a 4th century Ostrogothic scholar that founded a monastery and ran it for almost 3 decades. This shows that the church isn't just looking to investigate potential saints from the current and last generation, but also from even further back. All those deserving individuals who may have seemed forgotten to us on earth are now being brought forward and being recognized for their virtuous lives. Who knows, maybe this will open the door for the father of Europe himself, Charlemagne, to finally be canonized. Not sure about Eusebius of Caesarea and Clement of Alexandria. But it's finally time to get onto the other topic of this video, Blessed Carlo Acutis. Born in 1991 to an Italian family in London, he would grow up in Milan as part of the Ambrosian rite in the church. Sometime around the age of 3, his grandfather died and later appeared to him in a dream, asking him to pray for him. He would proceed to pray adamantly for others for the rest of his life. When he was in daycare, he was bullied by a number of other children. His nanny tried to encourage him to set boundaries, to which he said, "Jesus would not be happy if I lost my temper." He developed an interest in praying the rosary at around the same time, later devoting himself to the Blessed Virgin Mary as a child of the Mother of God. On the way to and from school, he would talk to the homeless and the caretakers of houses he passed, knowing them all by name. He was a gamer, liking to play Halo, Pokemon and Mario, but purposefully limited himself to a single hour a week to stop him from getting addicted, which alone really qualifies him for canonization, as only someone with immense discipline could control themselves to this extent. He received First Holy Communion at 7 and was confirmed at 12. He frequently attended confession, adoration, and meditated before the Eucharist after Mass. Not long after he was confirmed, he was made a catechist as part of his local parish's attempt to promote catechesis among the younger generations. Apparently he was very good at it. Blessed Carlo's faith would convince the Hindu caretaker of his household, his caretaker's friend, and his caretaker's mother to convert to Christianity. Blessed Carlo's own mother would also return to the church through his example and faith. Of the saints, he had an affinity for Saints Michael the Archangel, Francis of Assisi, Dominic Savio, 1842-57, Bernadette, Mary Magdalene de Bazzi, 1566-1607, Anthony of Padua, 1195-1231, and Tarsicius from the 3rd century, as well as Saints Jacinta, 1910-20, and Francisco Marto, 1908-20, though they were only blesseds in his day, and he had a strong devotion for his guardian angel as well. When his friends' parents were getting divorces, he made sure to support them as a friend could. He would stand up for and support disabled children. His most famous legacy was creating a website that documented Eucharistic miracles. This was after he had already designed 2 websites for his church. That final masterpiece was released in 2006, not long before he died. In a span of 12 days, he was diagnosed with a form of leukemia, or blood cancer, received the anointing of the sick, went into a coma, and died from a brain hemorrhage. At the age of 15, mind you. He offered his suffering for the then Pope Benedict XVI and the Church. Sometime after he died, he visited his mother in a dream and told her that she would conceive again, which she did almost 4 years after his passing. I would like to clarify something about his relics. Blessed Carlo Acutis hasn't even been dead for 20 years, and calling him incorrupt at this moment is a little too soon. Even if he is incorrupt, don't use his face to prove that. His face is covered by a silicone mask due to the discoloring and marks left on it during his hospitalization, so don't misunderstand what it means to be incorrupt. The cause for his canonization was opened on the 6th anniversary of his death in 2012. He was declared a servant of God by Pope Francis in 2013, then declared venerable in 2018. A miracle in 2013 occurred where a Brazilian boy was healed from a congenital defect of an annular pancreas, allowing him to eat normal solid food without feeling ill. For those who don't know what that is, it's when part of the pancreas grows around the common bile duct and duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. This results in feeding difficulties and throwing up, and that boy was not expected to live long past his 4th birthday. Apparently, he was healed on the same day his mother touched a picture of the then venerable Carlo Acutis and prayed for him, and he was able to eat solid foods. I remember his beatification back in 2020, which was delayed due to the pandemic. The second miracle occurred in 2022 when a Costa Rican woman had suffered a brain hemorrhage after she fell off a bike. Her mother went to Assisi 6 days later and prayed at Blessed Carlo Acutis' relics, leaving a note behind. That same day, her daughter started breathing on her own, and by the next day, she was able to move her arms and partly speak. By the 10th day after her mother's prayers in Assisi, her daughter was out of intensive care. Further scans showed that the brain hemorrhaging and bruising had completely disappeared. She only needed 1 week of physical therapy and visited Blessed Carlo Acutis' tomb 2 months after her accident. This miracle was approved in 2024 and his canonization was set for April in 2025. But then Pope Francis died and it was delayed. Pope Leo XIV rescheduled it for the 8th of September of this year, 2025, alongside Blessed Giorgio Frassati, 1901-25, who is ironically another young adult saint. So whilst Blessed Carlo Acutis is already in heaven and has been there for a while now, we can officially give him the title of saint. Keep in mind that he's already in heaven less than 20 years after leaving this earth. That's an impressive speed of entry into heaven, especially when considering how long many other candidates at various stages of canonization have been on their lists. But to Blessed Carlo Acutis, I say to you, congratulations. May I be the first to recognize you by your well-known title, Saint Carlo Acutis. You are finally recognized as experiencing the beatific vision in heaven as all the saints deserve, and what we on earth should desire above all else. For that, I ask for your prayers that we one day are able to join you before the Lord as well. You were able to utilize the internet for the benefit of others, as many today wish to do. Please pray that we are able to build upon the work that you started and leave a similar legacy for the next generation to continue that work. Especially since nowadays where the internet isn't just used by anti-Catholics against us, but plenty of Catholics are also using it to spread misinformation about the faith and or promote disobedience to our spiritual authorities. Please pray for Pope Leo XIV to guide the Church through the rise of AI and the impact that will have on society. You helped save souls and lead them to God. May the rest of us online Catholic influencers, creators and teachers do the same as well. I think that's everything for this video. We covered 1. The current process of canonization, 2. The previous processes of canonization, 3. The theological purpose and backing of canonizations, 4. Statistics associated with canonizations, and 5. The upcoming canonization of Saint Carlo Acutis. As I said at the beginning of the video, this is the first of many videos where I'll be redoing older videos, improving the quality and research of them whilst also providing narration. I'll try not to make them as long, but this was a very rich topic to cover. Thank you for watching, God bless you all, See you in the next video, comrades. Until then.